What's up, Flannelverse? We are back. We are ready for Thursday night football. We've got the Seattle Seahawks in Chicago, outdoors, Soldier Field. Not too bad of weather. It looks like it's like 40 degrees out right now in Chicago for this one. Maybe a little bit of light rain in the game, but not expecting much weather. Could be a fun game. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know what to expect exactly from this game. I'm not expecting it to be extremely high scoring, but we do have two offenses that have been throwing it quite a bit in recent weeks. So maybe we can hope for a bit of a shootout. As usual, I'm going to be going position by position through this game, primarily for DraftKings, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. After that, I will take a brief look at FanDuel. Then I'll flip back to DraftKings and draft a couple teams. I'll play around with lineups. I'm not going to draft anything. There's no drafting here, but I will be playing around with lineups on DraftKings, taking any questions that you guys have that I did not get to during the show. So that is going to be the plan here while you're coming in. We're a little bit over 4,100 subscribers on the channel, still trying to get to 5,000 by the end of the NFL season. So if you have not already subscribed, I would appreciate it if you would show that support by subscribing to the channel. Of course, liking the video is always great. Commenting, all that helpful as well. We'll start on quarterbacks in a minute. I did just see a little bit of an interesting angle from a betting. I'm in a betting Discord. I think it's the 4for4 betting Discord. Connor Allen pointed out an angle with the running backs that I'm kind of intrigued by. But we'll talk about that once we get to the running backs. Good to see many of you in chat already. Craig says, let's go win some money off my horrible Bears. Yes, let's. The Bears, NFC North, tough division this year. Bears not keeping up, but I still think they're going to be okay going forward, maybe next year. Why won't the Roto Grinders optimizer? I don't know. I have never had issue with getting defenses, but if I'm not getting to players that I don't want to get to, I just give a little boost to the projection, just like I give it like 0.2 fantasy points at a time until you get some, and then keep messing around with it, because maybe the defenses don't project well enough. I haven't actually played around with it, but that's usually the trick, is you just got to change the projection. If you're not getting to any, you also might not have any randomness on. So if you don't have randomness on, it's just going to give you the top projections, and you're just going to have a really condensed player pool typically. So you could turn on a little bit of randomness, maybe a little bit more likely to get there. All right. Neil was sweating. Toledo is how you pronounce that for those who don't know. 6 OTs. Yeah, no, I was working on my stuff for Saturday. All right, we're gonna get into it. Let's go. Quarterbacks. We've got Geno Smith and Caleb Williams. We'll start with Caleb. Caleb projecting for 10% ownership at captain and 44% ownership in the flex. So a little bit more than 50% ownership going to Caleb Williams. I think that is warranted. The Bears actually lead the NFL in neutral situation pass rate over the past 5 weeks. So they're just chucking it since they have a new coaching staff midway through the season. They got a new coaching staff. They've been chucking it in recent weeks. So I think Caleb looks good. He's only 9,600. He is over the past 5 weeks averaging 20.6 fantasy points per game. Not the best spot for quarterbacks against the Seahawks. They've allowed the 9th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. But I think the pass rate kind of matters a little bit more than the matchup. Like, it's a slightly negative matchup, but they've just been throwing the ball a ton. So yeah, I like Caleb. Also, a few different ways you can go with who you want to stack him with. He runs a little bit, runs like 30 yards per game or so. So everything looks good with Caleb. I don't think I'm going to be taking any major stand there. Like, I think 54% ownership feels about right. That's probably where I end up on Caleb. But yeah, I'll have him in around probably just over 50% of my lineups. Seems about right. 10% at captain seems about right. Also, I might even come in a little bit higher than that and a little bit lighter in the flex. But yeah, not taking any major stands there. Okay. Let's move on to Geno. I think. I guess I will say how to stack Caleb. I am always stacking him. He's shown a little bit of upside on the ground, so you could maybe consider, when you have him in the captain spot, only stacking him with one pass catcher. I don't think that's the way I'm playing. I think I'm requiring 2 pass catchers. I am including DeAndre Swift in that group of potential pass catchers with Caleb at captain, even though his line is like 13.5 receiving yards. So it's not like he's like an elite pass catcher, but he's shown the ability to break off like a 40-yard reception. So I'm kind of hedging my bets a little bit, requiring at least 2 pass catchers when I have Caleb at captain, but I am including DeAndre Swift in that group. Chris, I'll get to it's not a big secret. Just a like slight angle makes me like one running back just a little bit better. We'll get there in a second. What's up, Randall? Yeah, thank you for the reminder. Yeah, please do like the video, and of course subscribe. Okay. Geno Smith, the other quarterback in this game, getting a little bit more ownership than Caleb, 47.5% in the flex. In the captain spot, getting 11.5% projected ownership. So a little bit more ownership than Caleb. Again, I think Geno looks good. Also, he's $200 cheaper than Caleb. Seahawks rank 8th in neutral situation pass rate over the past 5 weeks. So they've also been chucking it quite a bit. What else can you really say? He has not run a ton. Like, let's see, I can pull it up here. He is averaging like 16 rushing yards per game. Okay, I had it in the wrong spot here. But yeah, 15.9 rushing yards per game on the season, 2 rushing touchdowns in 15 games for Geno Smith. I will say he's only averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game over the past 5 weeks, even with the Seahawks ranking 8th in the league in neutral pass rate. So has not been great this year by any means. I still think on a 1-game slate, I'm going to have a lot of Geno Smith. I'll probably be slightly underweight to the field. Maybe I'll have like 50% total. So I'll be like 7 or 8% less than the field. Not a bad matchup. Bears defense allowed the 13th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks. Ultimately, yeah, like I said, I'll be slightly underweight to the field on Geno Smith. I do prefer in a vacuum. I prefer Caleb Williams just because of the pass rate being a little bit higher. It's a home game for the Bears. He runs a little bit more. He's just been better in recent weeks fantasy wise. So I do think since the ownership is pretty close, I'd rather just play Caleb most of the time. But I still think I'll be pretty close, like just a little bit underweight to the field on Geno Smith. Similar to Caleb, I will always be stacking him regardless of where he is in the lineup. When I have Geno Smith at captain, I would prefer to have multiple pass catchers in the flex, and I would include Zach Charbonnet in that group also. All right. Keith asks, is this a game where you would not have either quarterback? Probably not. I think like if I were making one lineup, I would certainly have a quarterback in that lineup. I'll have some lineups because I'll be making more than 150. I'll have some lineups without any quarterbacks in them, but I think the vast majority of my lineups will have quarterbacks. Like typically, I think if I were making 5 lineups, I'd probably have at least one quarterback in all of them. I think they look good. Okay. That's a good note from Jesse, who did not join me for this one. You're not going to hear a mysterious bot just pop up randomly. Jesse says Geno was knocked out in the 3rd quarter of one of those games. That's a good note. I missed that. So maybe he would be averaging more like 15, 16 fantasy points per game, if not for that one game would come up a little bit. So that is a good note. Yeah, but he's certainly serviceable as Aaron says. Yeah, I think Geno. I'll be slightly underweight to the field, but not in any kind of massive way. All right, I think that's about it for quarterbacks. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's move on to running backs. The top, let's see, how much ownership is Zach Charbonnet getting? So the big news, of course, is that Kenneth Walker is out. And I want to look into this bit of news, or not even news, but this kind of angle that I heard from Connor Allen, which was he liked the idea of taking the over on, I think, 17.5 rushing yards from Kenny McIntosh, because he was noting that in the most recent game on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, I don't remember when they played exactly, Zach Charbonnet was actually playing as the RB3 because he's been banged up with an elbow injury. Kenny McIntosh actually played ahead of him in that game. Now, I'm not expecting Kenny McIntosh to play ahead of Zach Charbonnet today, to be clear. None of the projections would suggest that. And I do really like Zach Charbonnet today. But the angle that I was referring to earlier was kind of makes Kenny McIntosh a little bit more interesting on a week with short rest. He was already kind of interesting at his price. He's the RB2. I always like RB2s on these showdown slates when they have some some standalone value, and he has some standalone value. He's been involved in games without Kenneth Walker, but then I think the contingent upside is also a little bit higher with Kenny McIntosh because of Zach Charbonnet's injury. So it could just be like he re-aggravates the injury and Kenny McIntosh gets more run. But also like maybe it's just closer to a maybe it's a 60-40 split or something if they are concerned about the Zach Charbonnet injury. So I thought that was kind of an interesting angle. And he was talking about it from a betting perspective. But yeah, it was a nice little reminder. And I wanted to look at that to see. I have not had time. This is just I saw the note like 25 minutes ago and I was working on something. So I wanted to pull up the game log for the Seahawks to see to what extent this might be an angle worth playing. So obviously we had Kenneth Walker in week 16, so this is not going to be indicative of what we can expect this week. But yeah, Kenny McIntosh actually played 14 snaps to Zach Charbonnet's 11 in week 16. He had 3 rushes to Zach Charbonnet's 1. They ran the same number of routes. So yeah, I think that was a good call out from Connor. And yeah, he was talking about it from a betting perspective. We can play that angle for DFS also. Like maybe this is an indication that Zach Charbonnet not fully healthy. Now he was a full participant in practice this week, but still maybe there's a little bit of concern about that elbow. So ultimately, I'm going to like both of these Seattle running backs quite a bit. And you know, I'm not taking this information to say I think Zach Charbonnet is a fade, but I'm taking it to say in lineups where I'm not playing Zach Charbonnet, I'm going to have especially a lot of interest in Kenny McIntosh. And you can play them together in hopes that maybe it is a 60-40 split. I still think Zach Charbonnet is going to look pretty good. Charbonnet coming in at 15% ownership at captain. In the flex, Zach Charbonnet coming in at 39% ownership. So 54% total ownership going to Charbonnet. He's 8,400, so pretty reasonably priced. My inclination is still to play a lot of Zach Charbonnet. I think I probably come in overweight to the field on Zach Charbonnet, including at captain. I think he looks like a fantastic play. He's just too cheap for his role in games that Kenneth Walker has been out. And again, he practiced in full. So the most likely scenario, I think, is that we continue to see Zach Charbonnet get the bulk of the work. In those weeks 14 and 15 with Kenneth Walker out, Charbonnet had 30 carries and 10 targets on 69.4% route participation. That is a very nice number. Not many running backs get more than like 50% route participation. So the fact that he was up near 70% in those 2 games with Kenneth Walker out, and he saw 10 targets. So he's actually being targeted when he's running the routes. Also, you add on 15 carries per game in those games. Everything looks great for Zach Charbonnet. Also not a bad matchup in recent weeks. Bears defense has allowed the 9th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs over the past 5 weeks. I think that's actually been the case like the entire year. They've been, let me see. It's been a bit of a run funnel. Yeah, it's been a run funnel defense all year. That remains the case over the past 5 weeks. Everything looks good for Zach Charbonnet. Particularly good matchup looks like on the ground, not through the air, but a pretty neutral matchup through the air also. So I will be loading up on Zach Charbonnet. I probably come in overweight to the 54% that the field is projected for. But with that said, I am also going to have more than the field on Kenny McIntosh, certainly. And I'll pull up his ownership here. Okay, he's getting 23% ownership, so that's all right. I thought this was going to be more contrarian than it is based on what I had seen earlier in the day. 23% ownership, not at all contrarian. This is also a higher projection than I've seen elsewhere on Kenny McIntosh. What does fantasy points have him at? Okay, they have him just slightly lower. I thought I saw one other place had him at like 5 point something. So ultimately, not as sneaky as I had thought it was. I probably come in close to the field there, maybe slightly above weight to it. But yeah, I was getting excited to turn it over and see 9% ownership there. I'm not as excited by 23% ownership. I still think that it's an angle worth playing, a player that we should have some interest in here. But yeah, have to admit that's not quite the sneaky play that I thought it might be here. Yeah, other places I'm a little bit lower ownership, a little bit of a lighter projection, which would have looked better to me. I still think like pretty strong play at 23% ownership, but honestly not quite as exciting as I thought it might be. And And then George Holani, yeah, I guess he's only 400. If you want to play that angle, I think that's also totally fine. Like for kind of the same reason. If you think that we do see Charbonnet injured at all, Holani is going to get 2% projected ownership, and he's only 400. Might be the best play in his price range. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who's better. So I think that's a fine play to throw in there also. But for the most part, I'm gonna be playing Zach Charbonnet as though he's fully healthy. I'm gonna be playing a good amount of Kenny McIntosh because he's actually had a pretty good role regardless. Also, yeah, this is a good note from Brandon. No Travis Homer today. That is also impactful. Makes Holani a little bit more interesting. Yeah, you could maybe Darrington Evans. I don't know, or maybe it's just Holani. Wait, do we have him in the projection here? Evans has a projection. Does Homer? No. Okay, so Homer's already out in the Roto-Grandis projection. That's good to know. But yeah, Darrington Evans, George Holani. I don't have a strong lean between the two of them. Let's see. Evans projecting for 0.6 here. Holani projecting for 0. So they're getting the same projection. Let's take a look quickly at the game log. Week 16, neither of them saw the field. Week 15 with Kenneth Walker out. Holani did get 3 snaps, had 3 carries on those 3 snaps. Week 14 also had played 2 snaps, didn't have any carries in that one. So he's been seeing the field. I think I leaned that way over Darrington Evans just because we've actually seen him on the field a little bit recently. Wait, Evans is on Chicago. Okay, that's why he did not cross my mind. Oh wait, Travis Homer is also. Now I'm confusing myself. Travis Homer is on. Is he on the Bears now? He is on the Bears now. Yes, he was on he was previously on the Seahawks. That's why I'm confusing myself. Yes, he is not on the Bears. He is on the Bears. He's not on the Seahawks. Yes, my bad. I've been doing this too long, and now Travis Homer was on the Seahawks for forever. So that's my bad. Yeah, Homer revenge. Good call there. Homer revenge game. All right. Yeah, so George Holani would be next man up for the Seahawks. Okay. And then speaking of Bears running backs, DeAndre Swift looks pretty good. Also 7,600, a bit more contrarian, at least last I looked. Yeah, 30.5% projected ownership in the flex at captain. DeAndre Swift getting 7% projected ownership. I think he's pretty intriguing to me. Also, I think that I'm probably going to be overweight at captain, probably close to the field in the flex on DeAndre Swift. I think he looks good. I think he's the role has been pretty strong. It's not with Roschon Johnson, and the role isn't like amazing for DeAndre Swift, but over the past 5 games in which they both played, DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson, 63 carries for DeAndre Swift. So he's getting like 12, 13 carries per game. 13 targets on 38.3% route participation. So he's getting more than a couple targets per game. He's only 7,600. It's right in the middle matchup. Seahawks Stevens allowed the 17th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs over the past 5 weeks. But yeah, I think DeAndre Swift looks like a fairly strong play. And I think I'm probably going to be overweight to 7% Swift at captain, and be kind of neutral, like just a little bit overweight. Maybe I'll have 10% DeAndre Swift captain, and kind of neutral there in the flex to Swift. Roschon Johnson, also a fairly intriguing option. He is only 2,600, doesn't project extremely well because we have Swift in, and his role is just not going to be that amazing while Swift is in there, but he's only getting 8% ownership at 2,600. So you actually see Kenny McIntosh getting much more ownership. They're around the same price. McIntosh obviously also projects better, but he also has pretty strong contingent upside. The standalone value for Roschon Johnson, not amazing. Over the past 5 games that he's played with DeAndre Swift, he has 14 carries, so just under 3 carries per game, and 3 total targets in those games. So the standalone value, pretty weak for Roschon Johnson, but we know he still has significant contingent upside if anything were to happen to DeAndre Swift. And honestly, it would seem they should be incentivized to kind of see what they have in Roschon Johnson. They're out of the playoffs. They have nothing to play for at this point. It would really make sense for them to start leaning on They're young guys, and maybe give Roschon Johnson a bit more run. So I think there's at least some possibility of a bit more a bit more standalone value for Roschon Johnson. Like maybe they just work him in a little bit more because they want to see what they have. Like, do we need to address running back in the draft this year? I think Swift is just on a 2-year deal. But regardless, like they just might want to address running back. It would make sense if they wanted to see a little bit more of what they have in Roschon Johnson. So I do think that he's a pretty strong play at light ownership. Yeah, I think that's worth playing more than the field on Roschon Johnson. And then Travis Homer, so he's the one you're saying can replace that with Darrington Evans. Sure, yeah, and what is Evans' price tag? 200. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable play to take a shot on Darrington Evans. Also, he's also, I mean, he's a veteran at this point, right? He's been in the league for, I want to say, like 4 years or so. Maybe, I don't know if I'm off on that, but not like a young guy that they need to see at this point. But $200, yeah, I think that's a totally fine dart throw on Darrington Evans. But I really like Roschon Johnson also, just from the standpoint of it would just make sense that they give him a little bit more run. He's certainly capable of vulturing some goal line carries. Actually, let's pull that up. Go look at the advanced rushing numbers for the Bears. Do you remember when they said Khalil Herbert was going to be their goal line back? What a world. It never happened. Maybe it happened on like one game. All right. Teams inside the 5 carries. Roschon Johnson has 42.9% of the teams inside the 5 carries. So he has the better goal line role than DeAndre Swift. Yeah, I think, a lot of things pointing to Roschon looks like a pretty strong play today. I will be overweight to 8%. I'll probably have 16%. Maybe I'll double the field on Roschon. I think that's a pretty strong bet to make. Okay. I think that's it on running backs. I'll check in on chat a little bit and then move on to wide receivers. Daniel says, oops, that's the wrong one. I want a running back in every line, min 1, max 3, I think. I think that makes sense. I mean, I'm not setting any kind of rule like that, but yeah, I think the running backs look like strong plays on this slate. Although, like I said earlier, it is like both teams are top 8 in neutral pass rate over the past 5 weeks. So there is that's going against the running backs, but still, I think they look like pretty strong plays, and they're all pretty cheap too. Even the starters, it's 8,400 for Charbonnet, 7,600 for DeAndre Swift. Everything looks good there. Okay. All right. Let's move on. And talk about some wide receivers. I feel like I'm getting more efficient at this. Getting it done in less than an hour lately. All right. Wide receivers. Where do we want to start? Probably JSN. Yeah, so JSN, we'll start with the Seattle receivers. JSN, the best projection on the slate. He is 10,200, 37% projected ownership in the flex. At captain, JSN projected for 11.5% ownership. I think he's one of the best plays on the slate. Clearly, the field does also. He's certainly not sneaky at all, getting just under 50% ownership. I think it's warranted. He's been seeing a ton of work in recent weeks. Actually, I have not looked at the coverage matchup yet, so let's take a look at that. All right, so it's not the best coverage grade for JSN. That is sort of interesting. Still the best in terms of expected fantasy points per route run. I'm not overly concerned about it. I don't think we're seeing any kind of shadow here. Let's take a look, though. Yeah, we're not expecting any kind of shadow situation. And then in terms of slot receivers, I think I took a note of this. Let me check my notes real quick on JSN. Oh yeah, so he's on the one hand, the Bears defense has allowed the 12th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the past 5 weeks. However, JSN has run 81.5% of his routes from the slot over the past 5 weeks. The Bears defense has allowed the 8th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to slot receivers over the past 5 weeks. So it is a bit of a slot funnel matchup. And JSN is running I don't know, there are that many receivers in the league running that many of their routes from the slot. So from that perspective, looks like a really strong matchup for JSN on the micro level. That's funny. Riley says, I live in the Chicago area and I know the girl who is dating JSN. She lives here, so give JSN a plane in front of his girlfriend. But does she not usually travel to his games? Like, don't the wags usually travel with the players to their games? She doesn't travel with him. That's very sad. But yeah, sure, why not? Let's give him a boost. I already like JSN, so yeah, if you want to give him a plane in front of his girlfriend boost, I think that I don't know if does Geno Smith know that his girlfriend lives there? Is he going to be targeted more? Okay, they're not that serious. Okay. But yeah, regardless of any kind of plane in front of his girlfriend boost, I think JSN looks great. It's a strong matchup for slot receivers against Chicago over the past 5 weeks, as you can see here. 8th best matchup for slot receivers against Chicago. Yeah, looks like a strong play to me. And then you got DK Metcalf, and they're kind of those two. Like, it's not a trio like it was last year with Tyler Lockett. It is those two far and away project better. DK Metcalf getting 31% ownership in the flex. At captain, DK Metcalf getting 7.5% ownership. Again, I kind of like that number for DK Metcalf, that 7.5% number. Of course, not the best matchup for DK Metcalf. Now let's see, where do we have him lining up? DK Metcalf, left wide receiver. Still, actually, this does look like a positive matchup in terms of the wide receiver cornerback matchup sheet. In terms of schedule adjusted, actually, yeah, it's actually a really strong matchup. It's a terrible matchup for Tyler Lockett, according to this, but a strong matchup for the left wide receiver. Also, I didn't notice this earlier. 5th best matchup for left wide receivers against Chicago. Now, I don't know how often I didn't. Not was showing me in Discord yesterday, or a couple days ago. You can actually look this up in PFF where they, like, how often they line up left versus right. But I'm just going to trust the fantasy points. Like, the general data is DK is lining up out left, Lockett out right, and it's a great matchup for left wide receivers. So it does look like a strong matchup for DK. I think he's another one that I'd rather be above weight to 7.5%, 8% ownership in the captain spot in particular. He has not been seeing quite the same usage as JSN in recent weeks, which I thought was interesting. I think the last time I did a show on the Seahawks, it was like, oh, they have like identical usage. And then I think it might have been actually last week. And then we saw it in that game. It was just like, oh, they're peppering JSN with targets in that game. I was in on DK Metcalf in that game and was sort of disappointed by how infrequently he was being targeted. Actually, I can look at the game log to fact check myself here. It felt that way, though. In week 16, DK Metcalf, 7. Okay, never mind. 7 targets, so not bad. But yeah, JSN, 12 targets. So yeah, he was out targeting DK fairly significantly in that game. But DK is still running 91.3% of the route, still had 7 targets in that game. I think he's capable of breaking up big plays. So I really do like DK Metcalf, particularly in the captain spot. I'd rather be overweight there. In the flex, 31%. I don't know. I might come in underweight in the flex, overweight in the captain. But I might even come in with the field, over the field. I'll be close there, I think, in the flex. Also, I think he looks like a really strong option. I think he looks particularly strong in the captain spot because I think he has the ability to break some big plays here. And then you have Tyler Lockett, who, again, the role is not the same this year as it was last year for Tyler Lockett. The matchup isn't great. What I do like about Tyler Lockett is 14% ownership at 3,200. Like, the price tag is low enough. The ownership is low enough. We don't have a lot of really strong low owned plays on this slate. So I do think that even with the tough matchup for Tyler Lockett, I'm willing to be above weight to 14% there. Just hope for a spike week in terms of opportunities. Hope he scores a touchdown, etc. But let's take a look at the game log here for just Lockett. So most recently, 72% route participation, 2 targets. It's been pretty bleak in terms of, look at these targets. He hasn't seen significant targets since, he saw 4 in week 9. He hasn't exceeded 3 since week 9. I don't know. It's been early in the year. We saw some 6, 2, 7, 8, 6, 7, 5, and then it's just been bleak since then. 2, 4, 3, 3, 3, 1, 1, 2. Clearly does not have it to the extent he once did. Clearly, JSN and DK are the priorities here, but it's low enough ownership that I'll probably be slightly above weight to the field on 14% on Lockett, even in a tough matchup. And then outside of those three, are there any? I don't know if is Jake Bobo. He's 2,000. Doesn't project really well. I don't think I'm going to any Darden or Derek Young. Let's see. Let's take a look at Bobo. So in week 16, Bobo ran 5 routes, saw 1 target. Week 15, Bobo ran 9 routes, saw 1 target. Kind of just a dart throw play, hope for a touchdown. You're going to need probably a touchdown, or I guess if somebody got hurt, he could come in and play a little bit more, but not much of a role for Jake Bobo. Basically, just hope for a touchdown, and then if he gets a touchdown at 2,000, probably pays it off. Not necessarily at 2,000, but I think he's a fine dart throw. He's in a 150 set. I would have some Jake Bobo. If you're playing a 20 max, I might not have any Jake Bobo shares. I'd rather spend those shares on Roshan Johnson, Kenny McIntosh, etc. But yeah, in a large GPP, if you're 150 max in, I'll sprinkle in a few shares of Jake Bobo. All right, on the other side, got the Bears. DJ Moore looks pretty good. 37% ownership in the flex going to DJ Moore. At captain, DJ Moore getting 10% ownership. I don't think I'm taking any big stands there. I think I'm probably going to be right with the field on DJ Moore. Let's look at all the Bears over the past 5 weeks. Because again, they've been chucking it. So all the Bears receivers look pretty good from that standpoint. DJ Moore over the past 5 weeks, 49 targets in 5 games. So we're looking at just under 10 targets per game for DJ Moore on 93.6% route participation. He's obviously got more big play potential than Keenan Allen does. I think Rome does too, actually. But ultimately, I think DJ Moore looks pretty good. I don't know that I'm taking any major stand there on DJ Moore. 10% captain ownership, 37% flex ownership. That feels about right on DJ Moore. I might even come in slightly underweight here in the flex. The matchup for DJ Moore, actually, let's look at the wide receiver coverage for the Bears. Interesting. Okay, so it's actually a better coverage grade from this standpoint for Keenan Allen, where just based on the types of coverage the Seahawks play, it's a better matchup for Keenan Allen. That's interesting to me because I was looking at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed earlier, and let me check my notes here. I think it was a bad matchup from that standpoint, from where he lines up for Keenan Allen. So he's run 51.9% of his routes from the slot over the past 5 weeks. Seahawks defense has allowed the 9th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to slot receivers over the past 5 weeks. So it's a bad matchup for slot receivers, but it's a good matchup for what Keenan Allen, the types of coverage he does well against. I think it's a net positive for Keenan Allen because he doesn't run exclusively from the slot. They'll probably move him around to where they want him. So I think I was ready to say, I think that I wrote in my expert survey today that I was going to fade Keenan Allen, but the coverage matchup is actually not bad. So I don't feel that strongly about it. Let's see. 30.5% ownership in the flex to Keenan Allen. 6% at captain for Keenan Allen. I might come in slightly underweight in the flex, but I think 6% at captain actually looks pretty good. That's another number I'd probably rather be slightly above weight to Keenan Allen in the captain spot. And then Rome Odunze, I do once again like Rome Odunze, and this is not the first time I've said this on a showdown slate, but he's only getting 25% ownership. He's 7,000. I think this is a little bit lighter than I'd like to be on Rome. You look at his past 5 games. Let's go here. 33 targets, so just 6.5 targets per game for Rome Odunze, 79% route participation. And then he has that kind of big play upside that it feels like he's gotten a little bit unlucky on some of those, like pass interference in the end zone, or like I think it was last game where he was open in the end zone and Caleb just missed him. I think everything looks pretty good for Rome at fairly low ownership. I don't feel that strongly about it. Like, he is 7,000 is not nothing. He's kind of expensive, and 25% ownership is not nothing. So I don't think I'm taking any major stand on Rome Odunze, but I think it looks pretty good. 4% captain ownership, actually. If you want to get contrarian at captain, I think 4% captain ownership looks like another reasonable bet at captain. I don't know that I'm going to be too far off from the field there, but yeah, I don't have any major stands with the Bears receivers, I guess. I think I was ready to say I'm going to be fading Keenan Allen, but looking at the coverage matchup, looking pretty strong for Keenan Allen, I kind of take it back. I kind of think I'm landing right with the field, basically on all three of these receivers. Yeah, I wish I had more of a stand here, but I don't think I do on the Bears receivers. Colin Johnson, Tyler Scott. I don't think we have anything like it's been really condensed. We can just look at past 5 weeks, targets 52, 49, 33, drop down to 16 for Cole Kmet, and then it's down to 2 for Colin Johnson over the past 5 weeks. Nobody else really getting much usage here. So I think it's only dart throws, probably nobody else on the Bears receiving core that I would play in a 20 max, maybe in a 150 set. You can mix in a little bit of Colin Johnson, Tyler Scott, but I don't feel that strongly about them. All right, I'm going to check in on chat, move on to tight end. Yeah, Mateo says they all play out of the slot some, but Keenan is 2x DJ Moore and Rome. Yeah, exactly. Anthony asking me to rank the Bears receivers. Like I was just saying, I don't really have any great ranking. If I were to rank them, I think I would go DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen still, I think is how I land on the rankings there. But like Keenan Allen, any given game, like if he has 9 receptions, wouldn't be that shocking. Like, he's not really live for like a 60-yarder, but I think he is live for just 9 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown, and breaks the slate from just from PPR stuff. So I don't have that strong of a read on the Bears receivers, but I do think it's a better matchup for DJ Moore. Actually, let's take a look at the schedule just before I move on. So Chicago, where are we? Oh, they're way up here. Okay. Oh yeah. So it's a nice matchup for left wide receivers. Okay. A slightly negative matchup for slot receivers, slightly negative matchup for right wide receivers. So let's break the tie this way. Left wide receiver. Who plays left wide receiver according to the coverage matchup tool? DJ Moore. All right, there you go. DJ Moore, easy. There we have it. DJ Moore, the best receiver play on the Bears, followed by, I would say, Rome and then Keenan Allen. But that's, I don't know, Rome's ownership is high enough. Like, I would like it if you were a little bit more contrarian than he is. So I don't feel that strongly about that one. But yeah, I would say DJ Moore number 1. I guess I'll go Rome number 2 for the price savings and the big play upside, but it's pretty close with Rome and Keenan Allen. All right. Let's move on to tight ends. Tight end's kind of interesting. Well, who is the best projected tight end? Noah Fant. Okay, well, Noah Fant is the one that he's also getting the most ownership. Noah Fant, 3,600, getting 22% ownership. That's actually low. Okay, 22% in the flex for Noah Fant. I think that's lower than what I've seen elsewhere. At captain, Noah Fant getting 3% ownership. I really like Noah Fant. If he's going to get 25% ownership, I think that's a number that I'm going to be overweight on. It's a great matchup for Noah Fant. Just looking at tight ends versus Chicago over the past 5 weeks, it is the 4th best matchup for tight ends in the league over the past 5 weeks. The price is right for Noah Fant. The role is not amazing. He missed a game over the past 5 weeks. Yeah, in 4 games over the past 5 weeks. Actually, that's not that bad. 21 targets. He's over 5 targets per game in his past 4 games. 68.6% route participation. So the role is pretty strong. The matchup is great. The ownership is reasonable, and he's only 3,600. So yeah, I think Noah Fant is going to be one of my bigger overweight stands, particularly in the flex. I think he's going to be a big part of my lineups. And then you have, I guess, AJ Barner is still sort of viable. I think he's still essentially just a hope for a touchdown kind of play over the past 5 weeks. And Noah Fant missed one of these games, but 11 total targets over the past 5 weeks. I guess we can look at his game log here. When did Fant miss? Let's see. Fant missed week. Wait. Oh, so he had missed, I guess, week 12. So over 13, 14, 15, and 16. What has Barner done? He got up to 26% route participation in week 15, but he's been consistently around 17%. And he has actually seen 3, 2, 2, and 1 targets in those games with Noah Fant back. So I think he's like, as far as backup tight ends go, I think he's like a solid backup tight end option where you're essentially hoping for a touchdown. However, I mean, I think he's 3,000, right? He's priced at 3,000. So from that standpoint, it's like, okay, he's got a slightly better role for backup tight ends, but he's also on the expensive end. I still think just essentially a tournament dart throw. Probably doesn't make my first 20 lineups, but I would sprinkle him in a 150 set. Pharaoh Brown. I guess I didn't even look at Pharaoh Brown. Three routes run last week, 1, 2, 4, and so this is with Fant out. So the past 4 weeks with Noah Fant in, he has run a total of 10 routes in those games, and he has 4 targets. Pretty similar when you factor in the price tag there. Just a dart throw for large field tournaments. And then on the other side, we have Cole Kmet. Doesn't project as well as Noah Fant. He's more expensive, projects worse. Nothing looks that great for Cole Kmet, except for the ownership. And the ownership is where Cole Kmet gets kind of interesting here. Kmet coming in at 12.5% ownership for a tight end who's, I think he's running fairly significant routes. Pull that up. So over the past 5 weeks, yeah, I mean, 69.4% route participation. That's not bad. 16 targets in 5 games. So just over 3 targets per game. But I think like he's out on the field enough that we could see just a random spike for Kmet. Also doesn't have the great matchup that Noah Fant does. So like I'm taking a big stand on Noah Fant. Man, he had 10 targets in week 12. What happened in week 12? Were there other Bears out? All right, so in week 12, we had Keenan in, DJ Moore in, Odunze in, and Cole Kmet just randomly spiked to 10 targets. So I guess that's promising that they can just randomly spike a big target game for Cole Kmet. But ultimately, just because of the 12.5% ownership, and he's out on the field a ton, those are usually players that I like to target in Showdown. And I think that's going to be the case tonight for me with Cole Kmet. Even in like it's not a particularly great matchup. Where are we? Yeah, it's a like slightly below average matchup for tight ends against Seattle. And it's, yeah, okay. So he mostly runs. Wait. I don't know where he mostly runs. Does he mostly run? I think he mostly runs inline. I was trying to, I know Scott was telling me, so split out typically is going to be slot for tight ends. That's typically going to be, but then so it's a nice matchup for split out receivers, but not slot receivers. I don't know. I don't think there's anything there. I think it's just a slightly bad matchup. But he's 12.5% owned for a guy who's running 70% of the routes. Could randomly spike a big target game. I think Cole Kmet looks like a fairly strong option here at 4,400 at low ownership. And then we have Gerald Everett. And we'll take a look at Everett. So what's his ownership? 2% ownership. He's only 1,200. I think he's kind of a classic backup tight end. We'll look at his game log here. 4 routes last week, 1 target, 1 route, 0 targets, 7 routes, 0 targets, 10 routes, 1 target, 11 routes, 2 targets. Nothing really exciting there with Cole Kmet, just a large field tournament flyer. Mercedes Lewis, I think same thing. I'm not really excited about playing either of them. Would not play either in a 20 lineup set, but I would have probably 4 Cole Kmet lineups if I were playing just 20. Get to 20% Cole Kmet. I think that makes sense. Get a bit above the field there at 4,400. Just make bets there. But again, Noah Fant just stands out to me as a fantastic play at 25% ownership, given his low salary, the nice matchup, the role, etc. Everything looks good for Noah Fant. And then as far as kickers and defenses go, let me move sidebar down. Actually, I took some notes here on kickers and defenses, but let's take a look at the ownership. So we've got Jason Myers, 22% ownership. Seahawks defense, 20% ownership. Bears defense, 16% ownership. Cairo Santos, 18% ownership. Bears defense stands out to me once again. They're only 3,800. They're only getting 16% ownership. This game is in Chicago. I know it rains in Seattle also. So maybe the Seattle guys are used to some rain, but it's colder in Chicago. Maybe not. I guess it's like 40 degrees. Maybe the weather isn't a factor, but it's at least a home game for Chicago. And it's a nice spot for the Bears defense because Geno Smith gets sacked a good amount. He's been sacked 45 times on the year. That's tied for the 3rd most of any quarterback on the year. And he's thrown 15 interceptions on the year, which is tied for 2nd most of all quarterbacks. So getting sacked, throwing a lot of interceptions. Bears defense is cheap. They're not getting much ownership. I think that's a spot that you want to be overweight to the field there. Once again, I'm going to be playing a good amount of the Bears defense. JJ says it's warm there in Chicago. It's warm here too. So I guess we got a warm front here in the Midwest. But still, the weather aside, it's a home game for the Bears. Geno turns the ball over, 15 interceptions, gets sacked a lot, 45 sacks. So everything looks good to me for the Bears defense. That's a spot I want to be above weight to the field. And then the Seahawks defense, I think it's just kind of neutral. So they're getting 20% ownership. They are 4,000. Caleb has been sacked 60 times, so they have that going for them. That it's just that's the most by any quarterback on the season by far, the 60 sacks on Caleb. But he hasn't really turned the ball over much in terms of interceptions. Caleb has thrown 5 interceptions on the year, and the Seahawks defense, both defenses 2.3 sacks per game. They're both kind of middling in terms of their ability to sack. But ultimately, I think Bears defense looks great. Seahawks kind of they look fine. Matt, I thought it was week 12 that we were looking at with 10 targets for Kmet. If you feel like looking into that at all. Yeah, week 12. Oh, that was Minnesota. Okay, so you just had the wrong week. Okay. Yeah, so I guess maybe just a lot of quick targets. And Seahawks, I don't think they're going to pressure to the same extent. I don't know. That's a good note there. All right, let's take a brief look at FanDuel. And then I'll play around with some lineups. And then get to making mine. All right, at MVP, Geno Smith getting the most ownership, 23%. Caleb Williams, just 15%. Zach Charbonnet, 14%. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, 9%. DJ Moore, 8%. I don't think I have that much interest in Geno Smith at 23%. Like, that's just a lot of MVP ownership for Geno Smith. I think I'd rather play anybody else at this point. JSN at 9% kind of stands out to me. I like that number. DK Metcalf, 5.5% looks good. DJ Moore, 8% looks good. Rome is fine at 3%. Bears defense is actually kind of interesting to me. 2% ownership going to Bears defense at MVP. Kind of like that. I think I'm more inclined to play Noah Fant in the flex. Keenan, 5% is fine. I don't love it. I think I'd rather play DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, etc. But JSN, I think, is like if I were making just one lineup, it would probably be JSN at MVP at 9% for me. But Caleb looks like a strong option. Charbonnet looks like a strong option, etc. And then in the flex on FanDuel, again, Charbonnet at just 34.5%. He's only 11,000 on FanDuel, 34.5%. That looks like a pretty strong play. JSN 30% looks good. Swift at 28% at just 10,000 looks like a strong play. Rome 9,500, 20% ownership looks pretty good. Again, Bears defense, just 13% ownership at 8,500 looks like a really strong play to me. Noah Fant, 7,500, 11.5% ownership looks like a really strong play to me. So we do have some pretty good, like, sort of contrarian options on FanDuel. I don't love the super, like, sub 10%. Roshan, actually, I kind of like at 7,500, 6%. Komet, 7%, 8,000. I guess I do like a few of these, but I particularly like Noah Fant, Bears defense on FanDuel. McIntosh looks okay, 7,000, 14% on FanDuel. Yeah, so we do have some pretty good plays there. All right. I'm going to make some lineups. I'm going to check in on chat before I do so. Not says the Bears are missing 3 offensive linemen. Week 12, Caleb threw 47 times. Yeah. Yeah, I play some single entry also, Paulin, but I also don't really spend the time hand building them. Like when I have time, I like to hand build my single entry lineups. On these showdown slates, I just kind of throw them all into one spreadsheet, and whatever happens to land in my single entry lands there. So I do get into some of them, but not like if I had time, I would be hand building those like I do on main slate sometimes. I have not been doing that on these. I haven't given myself the time there. DJ Moore captain. Somebody just asked for a DJ Moore captain. Marco says DJ Moore in the captain spot. Let's try. I like DJ Moore in the captain. So why not? I also like Caleb Williams, so I'll just throw him in there. I think Noah Fant makes it in right away. I think Bears defense looks really good right away. So now we have 9,000 left per player. Yeah. Now if I play DK Metcalf, it's like I'm only leaving 400 on the table. This is probably going to be somewhat chalky, I would think. Caleb with DJ Moore. Bears defense. I do have 3 Seahawks against the Bears defense, so I guess I'm at least pulling one lever that gets it a little bit more unique. But I think I have some concern that this is going to be chalky. So I could get away from Bears defense and move down to Kenny McIntosh. That could be a little bit more unique, leaving 1,800 on the table. I think it's fine with the Bears defense, and they're probably not going to be duped that many times. But this one would be a little bit more contrarian, I would think. All right, so there's... What else could I do? I also really like JSN captain. I could do I don't often build like quarterback captain lineups here, but I think Caleb captain. I like DJ Moore. I could do a triple stack with Cole Kmet. And this could be like what if the Bears just dominate the game? Throw the Bears defense in here. And then just have one pay up option for the Seahawks. JSN now, I would only leave 200 on the table, which I don't totally love. But I could go DK Metcalf or Zach Charbonnet in here, and I think that's a fairly strong lineup with a triple stack and the just like Bears shut them down. I think that could work. And then you just get the whoever scores the most PPR points. DK, Charbonnet, JSN would fit. It'd just be, I think, a little bit more likely to be duped because it's only leaving 200 on the table. I think that could work for a large field GPP. It might be somewhat contrarian to do like if we play Charbonnet at captain and then throw in McIntosh in the flex, like playing them together might be sort of more contrarian, although McIntosh not getting like really low ownership. So maybe not. I think you could play the Seahawks defense here too. Correlates well enough. Now we have all the money left that we want. Some of my favorite options here, of course, Caleb with DJ Moore and JSN could work. Leaves 1,200 on the table. I think that kind of makes sense. Kind of a fun lineup. This one, you could also like McIntosh. You could afford Noah Fant in this one. So I think just pivoting down to McIntosh limits the number of dupes somewhat. All right. Let me check in on any other questions or anything. Charbonnet, I see. Okay. Allen. Sean says, Allen instead of DJ Moore gets even more contrarian if you want to go that route. All right. Anything else? We ready to go build some lineups? Had a couple people build. Kings Back says, why not a Myers captain? It could happen. Yeah, certainly. Like we've seen kickers just dominating on these slates. Would not be that surprising to see a Myers captain win it. I did want to shout out the Discord, the Flannelverse Discord. Had a couple people join today, and I have not. And one person said like, how did I not know there was Discord? And like I told him, it's because I forget to say it on these shows. So if you are not already part of the Flannelverse Discord, did want to give a shout out. Really good community there. If you want to talk DFS, best ball, whatever else you want to talk about, the link is in the description of this video if you are interested in another place to hang out with the community. But I got to get going. I'm going to go make some lineups. I've got nearly 20 minutes left. I'm just not even sure what to do. Actually, do I have more than 20 minutes left? It's 7:15. Yeah, more than 20 minutes left. I'm going to take that time to spend some time on my lineups. We talked flash drafts, by the way, in the Discord. If you are thinking about doing it, I love flash drafts on these island slates. They are a lot of fun. I guess another housekeeping note. I think I'm probably going to do another late night stream tomorrow night for the Saturday slate. Haven't figured out the specifics because, again, I have family in town. We're going to be celebrating tomorrow night. So don't know what time I will be home, but I'm hoping to do a stream tomorrow night at some point. I'm shooting for I think around midnight Eastern is what I'm shooting for, but not sure if that's going to work out exactly. But keep your eye on the YouTube channel for that. Maybe I'll have guests, maybe I won't. I don't know how that's going to go, but I'm going to get going, go make my lineups. Thank you all for hanging out, subscribing if you have subscribed. Help me get to that 5,000 goal. Liking the video, always appreciated. Commenting, and let's win some money tonight. Had somebody win yesterday. That was fun to see. If you win some money, let me know. I always love to hear people winning money on these slates if you think the show helped out at all. So let me know. All right. Thanks, guys. Good luck tonight. Catch you tomorrow.